Back here, 615 Sessions podcast on the getbeast.com Zoom line. Joining us is one of the best and brightest in the NFL business, Dianna Russini from ESPN. You know her from all of your NFL coverage. She hosts a bunch of the NFL programming on ESPN as well. In fact, she does a great Twitter show with our dear friend Jason Fitz, Monday Tailgate, that you can see before every Monday Night Football game. Dianna, I really appreciate you stopping by. What's up?
I heard that this is the #1 sports podcast in the country right now, and that's why I'm here. So I'm really excited to join this big show. Yep. And I mean, I did see something about some ranking, and you're like in a top area of something. What is it that you're achieving here?
So precious little, unless you're my mother, but I appreciate you saying that. The Nashville Scene, a local publication here in our fair Music City, puts out a best of every year. So they have the best of, you get best of cheeseburgers, best of dive bars, best of media coverage. And fortunately, the 615 Sessions was the reader's choice for the best sports podcast and radio show in 2020. So I appreciate your acknowledgments. I will await. I will send the check is in the mail. The check is in.
That is incredible. You should be really proud of that, because I feel like listeners to podcasts, especially, and I think a podcast listen is really intimate. You are stuck in these people's ears, and they choose you. They have to go find you. So that's incredible. And do not be embarrassed at all that you are so proud to be the 615 champ on podcasts. I was on the cover of 201 magazine,
Ooh.
Which is the North Jersey, Bergen County area magazine. And I thought it wasn't a big deal because I get to be on national TV all the time. But my parents was the only thing hanging on the fridge in their kitchen now. Nothing else I've ever done, just that. So it's that hometown love. There's nothing better than it.
No doubt, no doubt. You got to do it for the hometown people. I do love the podcast. You do plenty of podcasts, radios yourself. I hear you on Le Batard show all the time, which is an entirely different experience, but one of my favorite, without question. And it is true. You are the voice in people's head. So I do appreciate that relationship that we have with our audience, and the fact that we have such great guests who carry my ass when we do the podcast. So we're grateful for Dianna Russini's presence. Been a lot of stuff going on. You and I were chatting before we got rolling here about just everything that you have had to do, that everybody in NFL media has had to do to continue with the coverage of football as if things were normal. And you were here on Tuesday night for a little pandemic Tuesday night football between the Tennessee Titans and the Bills. So I figured we chatted up about that and everything else that you've had going on, because you've been on it with Titans news. People, you are one of the people's go-to sources for information. You've been crushing it so far here, certainly in the local market. But I guess how has it been? I know you and I just talked about this, but for the audience, I guess just kind of put it into context what your travel schedule has been like to find yourself in Nashville on a Tuesday night.
Well, Tuesday was weird and awesome. I feel like all combined in one. I still don't know what day of the week it is, right? It really threw us off, which you got to imagine if it's throwing us off, what is it doing to the players and the coaches who are so regimented about their schedules and the way they live and the way they prepare, which is why I think Titans fans should definitely have some concerns against Houston coming into town because of all that, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But just for an NFL reporter right now, we are only going to games that are considered to be premier, that are in big markets. Disney is really being careful and cautious about travel. So we have to go through a lot of different protocols. I get tested every week. They're just trying to be really careful. And the biggest loss for me personally is really the interaction. And every reporter feels that way. But specifically for me, because I don't cover just one team. So the only time I'm seeing players is game day usually, unless it's the playoffs and I get to go to some practices. So post-game locker room access, 90% of the conversations I have aren't even about the game when I see some of the guys, because it's like fast catch up on life because I haven't seen their faces, or I'm out of town a lot. So to not have that anymore and to completely rely on my phone, which is scary because you could think you have a decent amount of contacts, but it's never enough. It's never. I don't have a lot of phone numbers of agents and players and coaches. I have an okay amount, but for what is required for the kind of coverage we're doing now, it makes it really hard. And I miss talking. I love covering football because I like football players. I like talking to them. I like learning. I like being in the environment. And we don't get to do that anymore, No. And it was great to be in Nashville to see fans. That was fun. Saw a couple Buffalo Bills fans there. I actually saw a lot of them. I didn't like that.
These traders, you get 8,500 in the stadium, and you're selling them to Bills fans. The Bills fans. I can't even be mad at them though. They travel unlike any other. It's incredible.
I love Bills Mafia. I went up there last year, and I was a little anti because I'm from the North New Jersey area, so we're Jets, Giants people, and the Bills were always just kind of like the team that wants to be New York. I mean, they are New York, but they want to be New York. That's how I used to look at them. Like, oh, they're in the suburbs. They don't know anything.
It's at least a 30-minute Amtrak ride.
Exactly. No, 30. It's a long flight. It's a long train ride up there, and it's cold and it's miserable. But I've gone up there, and I've been fortunate enough to cover them, and their fans are why I love them. I mean, actually, the Bills players are great too, but I got to be part of Bills Mafia for pregame, and I didn't get to drink, but there was enough alcohol in the air. I was hammered. Like I was definitely hammered. But just their energy is amazing, and they're great. But look, the Titans fans too. I was chatting with a bunch of them when I was getting ready to go live on SportsCenter and stuff. And I mean, Titans fan base, they're really passionate and very aggressive on Twitter. I'm sorry to those out there that get really mad at me over everything.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second because, like I said, you've been, especially with the Tannehill stuff, going back to, I think if I remember correctly, the coming into that season, and then once there was talk of him potentially Mariota potentially being replaced, and you had the information about them looking to re-sign Ryan Tannehill to a long-term deal. I think that was around the Oakland game in December. Like people here in Nashville, you are being entirely too generous with them, Dianna, because I would not be so diplomatic with the amount of just reaction that you got to simply doing your job and reporting the news. That's always inexplicable to me.
I just got married, and I put in the vows, you must love me as much as Nashville loves Marcus Mariota.
Oof.
Because that's what was always the bottom line of that. That was always what the tone was. It was, I don't care that you're telling me that the organization is really trying to move in a different direction. I don't care about the facts. We love him. We're invested. We can't let go. And the commitment so many fans had to him was so impressive. So, when you're covering all these different teams and I'm friends with a lot of my NFL colleagues at ESPN, we very rarely get into the weeds about fan bases and people's Twitter because you have to handle it. We're all adults, and everybody deals with their own amount of hate. But the Titans fan base is the only group that had us talking behind the scenes about their hate of what, like Chris Long and I talk about it all the time. I'm like, why are Titans fans so angry and mad all the time, no matter what happens? And I have grown to now appreciate and love their commitment to just being mean. Even when they're winning. It's like, dude, I could tweet anything tomorrow that's Tennessee related, and there's got to be 3 or 4 there just like, you're stupid, you dumb bitch.
No, you're good. It's a podcast, Dianna. Listen, you are totally fine. And listen, I've called them as a fan base much nastier things. Don't worry about it.
But again, there's an appreciation there too, because they have their own mindset on thought process on it. And in terms of breaking more stories this year, and I'm so glad you brought up the Ryan Tannehill, Marcus Mariota competition, we'll call it, back during training camp. I remember I said it on Get Up. Very much you could imagine I trust the people that had shared that with me.
Sure.
But I said it thinking that all of Nashville knew that. Like, I thought that was like out there. So after I start talking about how the competition's heating up, and it's not that Ryan is that much better, but it's just, there's just a mood there that they're ready. They're losing patience with Marcus. They were looking for more. And so, yeah, then fast forward to December about, obviously when Ryan was the starter and we know Tennessee doesn't like to do deals during the season, but there was definitely conversations being had. And I mean, even then, no one wanted to give up on Marcus, but I wish Marcus the best now. I actually root for him, and he's probably not going to see any time this year, but all the best to him. But it's worked out. That's what's important for Ryan Tannehill and Titans, especially after what we saw last week.
Yeah, and listen, retrospect is an easy thing to do, but they don't know how good they got it. I mean, I've only been covering them for about 5 years. I got the job down here out of college, and I went to Indiana, came down here, and they sucked. They were absolutely terrible. My first year here, it was they won 3 games. It was Marcus's rookie year. They ended up having the first overall pick, and then they traded it to the Rams, the whole Jared Goff thing, all in all. And then, even when they were winning, because every year that I've covered them, they have not had a losing season. 9-7 in the NFL, pretty good. But with Marcus and the style of football that they played, I hated to watch them, Dianna. I hated to watch them. It was it was the biggest frustration that I could not change the channel on them in the press box because it was just such a sluggish, laboring situation for them. They were not aesthetically pleasing. And then Ryan Tannehill comes in here. They're scoring 30 points a game. It's borderline football porn. It's incredible what Arthur Smith and this coaching staff has been able to get out of him. The resurgence is really unlike anything that I have seen in my football consuming life or professionally anyway. But the Marcus thing is so real. He is St. Marcus is unlike anything else. It's not Steve McNair. It's not Eddie George. It's not people who have historically won for this franchise. But what he represents as a human being more than a football player, I think, is why people gravitated towards him the way that he did, up until the last, when it's the worst football game that I've ever seen played in Denver when he got benched. And things transpired the way that they did.
They've obviously everyone has come around on Tannehill now and what Arthur Smith has done. Probably before this Tuesday game, I would never tell Arthur this, but Brian Dable is without a doubt my favorite offensive coordinator. I've also known Brian for it has to be 15 years now, going back all the way back to New York Jets days. And I don't know. I think he's really creative. I think he's aggressive. I think what he's done with Josh Allen was tremendous. But Arthur now is just second for me. But now, he's moved into first now that he got that win and has obviously been able to develop and really give this offense such an identity. I love talking to defensive coordinators before they go up against Tennessee about what they see. And there's always they start with Derrick Henry. There's no question. Everyone talks about the run game. But there's so much respect on Ryan Tannehill, almost behind the scenes more than I think the public likes to talk about him. I find coaches are more fearful of his ability than what fan bases think that he can do. I think we can safely say now, though, that everyone is sold on him in Tennessee and him getting the deal and all that worked out. But you talk about the little bit of a sour taste in the mouths of people about Tennessee pre this season and even this season. And I can tell you as someone that's been fortunate enough to cover Tennessee for 4 or 5 years now, initially when I got to ESPN, the only reason why I started covering Tennessee was because I was new and not very good.
Sure.
So I never got the big games. And
I talk to Cam Wolf about this all the time when he comes down to Miami. You're not telling these people anything they don't know. It's all right.
So it was just it's not punishment, but it was, let's send the new girl who's greener than the greenest grass you can find in all the land to Tennessee and let's see how she does. And so I pretty much fell in love with Nashville years ago. And because of that, I have felt connected to the team. And then they started to get better as I started to grow at ESPN. And even last year, like when I tell you I had to beg my bosses to send me to come cover practice before the wild card. Like, what?
No, I remember talking to you about it when you came to St. Thomas Sports Park. I'm like, how difficult is it for you to get a trip here, or to come and cover this particular team? How difficult is the justification for the network? And you were very honest about it.
Yeah, it's been hard, and I've shared it with the organization too. Like, hey, like I want to get you guys on TV more and get you the coverage because I think you deserve it. But I think it's just been a difficult, almost like a bit of a marketing reason, and we can talk about this some other time, but there's a lot of reasons why I don't think Tennessee has really slapped the faces of the big networks, in the face yet, with the fact that they actually have great stories and they have great people, and the organization is while they are considered to be newer and younger, they're just as popular and can be even more. But yeah, I think it's getting a little easier. I don't want to, obviously COVID has made Tennessee the story of the year in a sense, because it is the story of, you can probably make an argument COVID-19 is maybe the story of the decade for us as the world.
Societally.
Yeah. So unfortunately that put them back in the light, and they're undefeated.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to have an undefeated football team, and for them to have gone through the past 16 days. And I'm curious, I guess, as to how like you have consumed all of these things, because I know that when I wake up, I'm a team reporter. My job is to also keep up with what's going on with the Tennessee Titans, and I know that every morning for the past 2 weeks, I'm sitting there refreshing my feed because people aren't getting back to me fast enough. I'm trying to wait to see what Dianna Russini, Tom Pelissero is saying about who tested positive today, because I want to know if I could go to work. Today's the first day I've been in Titans practice in the better part of 18 days. It's been totally wild.
Goodness, yeah.
So from your perspective, being on the other end of that, what has it been like reporting that kind of situation specifically, and then ultimately leading up to that Tuesday night football game where everybody in the NFL seems to have laser focused their frustrations on Tennessee, rightly or wrongly. And listen, I know that they've done stuff wrong to be under criticism for the league. They will be, the punishments will come down as they will in a couple of weeks. We'll see how that goes. But I guess, can you just kind of walk people through that situation from your perspective? Because you've been on it from the jump.
I don't think the punishments are going to be that severe.
Yeah.
I think they're going to get pinned for a couple little mask things that John Robinson mentioned the other day in the press conference. But, I've been trying to figure out how I want to take a stand on this, because I have the information from all sides, that being the front office, of the NFL, the NFLPA, and of Tennessee. And it just seems like there was a miscommunication with some of the details there and some of the things that they were allowed to do. And it's not as bad and callous as I feel the rest of the world thinks that Tennessee was. We all know that the league would have made this team forfeit if it was that bad, if they were doing things to harm and ruin the season. But in terms of just the day-to-day on it, every person that I talk to in the NFL, in the league office, the NFLPA, and even in Tennessee, everyone's up at 4 a.m., which is insane.
Yeah.
And I don't mean up like dragon, like wide awake. Up. And everyone's talking to everybody, because nobody was sleeping during that entire 2-week period there. I actually started to go to bed earlier because I would set my alarm for like 3:45. I would be up just starting to talk to the people on the East Coast that I talk to. And obviously you guys being on Central Time, waiting for the Central Time people to find out stuff. And to be very open with you, sometimes I knew things before the league and the league knew things before the team. Like there was just a lot of talk
Mm.
But it was emotional is the right word, because it was so stressful for the team to wait and know that their whole day was going to revolve around those answers. And, you know, I think it was pretty clear that the league was sharing a lot of information, as you saw a lot of national reporters getting it. But yeah, no, that it was stressful. It was tiring. I mean, what's funny is I had my source from New York send me a note on Wednesday morning, and I was exhausted from the game the night before. And I was like, oh yeah, we're still doing this. Like, he's like,
it's ongoing.
Yeah, like I forgot. It's almost like I thought once Tennessee started to play, they beat COVID. You know, or it's like, that's not what it is. So it's like, hey, Tennessee, clean text. I'm like, oh, great. You know, so, you know, I sent out my mass text to everybody that I'm tight with. I was like, hey, you guys are clean. Or, you know, players, that was another thing. That was always the really interesting side too. Sometimes players wouldn't hear yet, because I guess I don't know how Tennessee communicates to their guys. I'm assuming they use there's like a Teams program that you can like instant message each other.
Like a Slack channel.
Yeah, exactly. And they just communicate that way. I'm assuming that's what they do. I know like almost every other team does. But sometimes they weren't getting messages. So I'd have guys on the team like anything, and because they wanted to know what their day was going to be. So yeah, that was awful. It was a nightmare. I don't wish it upon anybody. And let's just hope that Tennessee never has to deal with this, and no other team ever does for the rest of the year.
No doubt. I don't know. They continue to work people back in off the COVID-19 list, because there's still like 7 of them that are sitting out there.
So, Buck, you know what I was thinking about? You know how we all, and anyone listening to this that has been in a public area, probably had to fill out some form. Have you been exposed to anybody with COVID in the last 14 days? Do you think Tennessee players say, yeah, 24?
Yeah. Half the roster.
What's their answer when they fill those forms out?
I mean, well, listen, they're not supposed to be going anywhere anyway, so they better not be filling out any forms of any kind unless they want to get their season postponed again. But yeah, your point is well taken. I mean, I was talking to one of the guys who tested positive actually right before we popped on, and they're just stuck in their houses, and they these guys get shoved in a giant metal tube to travel together, and we all know the kind of timeline for defensive play caller Shane Bowen, and whether the protocol was acceptable for them to travel and him to not, and all of these things gone by. But it's such a taxing thing, as it has been on all of us who have worked through 2020 in some form or fashion, to have to deal with these things as well.
But you touched on something that I don't think is being spoken about on the national level, which is, I think a lot of people believe that the Titans did things that were against protocol to get advantages, whereas a lot of people don't know that flight to Minnesota was, we'll call the deadly weapon. That was really the reasoning for the spread of this.
That's your contact tracing.
That was it. It wasn't the practices, from what I can tell from the review, for the people I've spoken to that are part of that. It was all that flight. And you know, I saw a lot of responses on social media to Ryan's quotes post-game about him, you know, using some of that criticism about the way Tennessee has handled everything as motivation. And, you know, I was reading some of the responses from people I really respect in the business, and I just don't think everyone has the facts, and people are going really quick to pin them down for being sloppy with this, when I don't think it was as bad as it's being let out.
Well, and I think that's kind of Titans fans are mean as hell, and they're frustrated. We talked about that earlier in the pod, but it's because they get ignored a lot. They're a very easy for a long time. They've been a very easy franchise to ignore, and so when they go to their favorite national NFL reporter and they see things that don't necessarily add up with what they're being told on the local level, and it's not like the local people's word is gospel on this. There's plenty of stuff that we miss, or that falls through the cracks, or that, national people may get over us, whatever the case may be. But it just was never as malicious as they were being painted
Yeah.
And I think because, I mean, and we all hear about things that, as you mentioned, what John Robinson talked about with the masks, and you hear about things that go down in the training rooms, whether they were following the protocol exactly to a T or whatever that caused, this review for the NFL to, for them to be required to turn over the tapes in essence. But everything that led up to that was all tracked back to that flight. And I think people are pretty quick to ignore that, dismiss that, or just not even see it in the first place. And the thing with the players, I mean, they've been catching it on all sides, even here locally. Like Paul Kuharsky, I love Paul. He's a regular guest co-host on this podcast, and I told him this: you got to get the dates right on those workouts. If you're gonna put it out there that they're in violation of the protocol and that they're holding these workouts across college campuses and high schools in Middle Tennessee, you got to get the dates right. So the players just start screaming on social media, which is very, very rare. A.J. Brown, Jeffrey Simmons, and then a bunch of them start blowing me up about this is not right. His dates are inaccurate. We were not told this. This was not communicated to us on Slack. And then I'm able to advance the reporting, and then other people are able to advance the reporting based on that, and the information changes. But it's all just been twisted, I guess, in an interesting way from start to finish. The reaction, though, because you talk about once they won, right? You think the COVID situation with the Titans is done. They kicked the Bills' ass, they kicked COVID's ass, everybody's moving on. But then you see a lot of people responding to the Titans video that they put out of Taylor Lewan, and he's saying they hate to see it, don't put us in adversity, yada yada yada, and the vitriol in response to that video. Still based off of people's assumptions about Tennessee. I'm wondering what you hear, what you see, because you're looking at this from a much larger worldview than any of us here in Nashville.
I'm looking at it from a much larger worldview, but like you, I have the information. Right. So the only thing I can do is to make sure ESPN is reporting it the right way. And when I'm on shows with analysts who, for example, Bart Scott, was basically saying last week, suspend Mike Vrabel for the rest of the year. I'm like, for what? And they went to commercial, and we talked on commercial break. I'm like, Bart, no, you're not understanding. This was not, as we discussed, this is not, they didn't do this intentionally. There were some small errors with the math, blah, blah, blah. And, the only thing you could do is just continually try to report it the way the facts are. And I certainly would not be scared if I had information that proved that, John Robinson had it the whole time and was walking around hugging everybody. I would be the first one to jump on that.
Big hugger, J-Rob. Big affection.
Yeah, furthest thing from it. So I just think, I just don't think enough people know the information for it from a national level to swing and get people to start thinking smartly. Everyone is just taking the clickbait and the low-hanging fruit of, Tennessee got investigated, guilty. They're the reasons why football is going to come to an end. Cancel Tennessee, and unfortunately that stuff, it spreads like wildfire, and you've seen it all over our air. But, I'm pretty communicative with the people on the NFL side at the company about it. And they see my emails of, here are the facts, here's what we should go with, let's be careful. And the Taylor Lewan video, I didn't really take that as, and Taylor better than I do, way better than I do. Although I threw up on him once, which I'll tell that story in it.
Whoa. Everything comes to a screeching halt right there. What?
Okay. So I'm at the Pro Bowl.
And by the way, if anybody deserved it, it's Taylor. If anybody deserved it, it's Lewan.
I mean, you talk about going from having a really respectful working relationship with somebody to then throwing up on them, and then you're embarrassed by it. So then I have to see him all the time, and I hate it. This is actually where I love COVID, because I don't have to see him. Because he loves to remind me.
Oh, sure. He's the worst.
So I was at the Pro Bowl 2 years ago, and a player actually from the Bills, who I've known for a long time, sent me a text and said, hey, my wife's friend isn't coming to the Universal Studios park tonight, because what they do is they shut Universal down and they give players passes, and the park is theirs. he's like, do you want to come with us? Like, take the pass, you know, enjoy the ride. You know, it was really nice of him to do that. So I said, yeah, I'll go. And I had felt a little nauseous earlier in the day. I was interviewing Alvin Kamara, and I cover Alvin a lot. I cover the Saints as probably like the number one team I cover. And Al said to me right after the interview, he looked at me, he said, you look green. Mm-hmm. I said, I do? I said, no, I'm just really white. He's like, no, you look green. I'm like, yeah, I'm not feeling great. So fast forward, I go to Universal, still kind of just, you know, we all have been there. You know that feeling. You're just not right. But I didn't want to miss this opportunity. I wanted to go on the Hulk. I wanted to go on all the rides. And I'm online, well, barely a line, but it's Will and it's Taylor, their wives and girlfriends. And I'm like, hi, guys. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they were in the row in front of me on the Hulk Hogan ride, which your arms are pinned behind you. I had my hair down, and I was next to Taylor's brother-in-law. Yeah, so it's Taylor's wife's brother. And the ride goes, and I'm telling you, the first loop-de-loop, I'm like, this is going to be an awful experience. And it was. By the second loop-de-loop, I had thrown up all over his brother-in-law, all over Taylor's head, his hands, his wife, Will's. Everybody had tears.
Dianna, no!
It was in my hair. It was all over my shirt. It was so embarrassing. And the best part is, and this is like, of course, so Taylor was like so nice about it. He didn't embarrass me. He made me go grab a beer and chug it and was like, you just need to like beat it.
Power through.
I'm like, I'm not going to power through this. Like, this is not like this. Like, I had a bug. Like, I straight up had some sort of stomach bug because I threw up for a whole nother day. Like, it was the worst 2 days of my life. Like, no, I'm not even being dramatic. I had breakfast with my mother this morning, and we were talking about it. She's like, I cannot believe you did all that. It was so funny that we're talking about this now. But, so I stayed with them. I kept fighting through it, and I finally quit. And Taylor, to this day, it was like, I give you some, like, you tried so hard. I was sweating. It reminded me of that scene in Bridesmaids, you know, when she's like, you know, you want to puke. And she's like, oh, no, I'm good. I'm good. You know, so, yeah, that's my Taylor Lewan puke on him story, unfortunately. And I guess it bonds us in a way. But I forgot what we were talking about in terms of.
It doesn't matter. It stinks, Dianna, because that's the clip that they're going to use when they promo this out on social.
This is going to be Taylor will respond to it. He'll be like, "Yep, it was disgusting."
1,000%, and that's just what we say down here. Bless your heart. Bless
your heart. Yep.
That is such a bad, but you know, all credit in the world to you, because I would have tapped out. So I probably wouldn't even gone on the ride. I'm not a roller person by any stretch of the imagination, but good on you for that. And let you know, as for Lewan, like, sweet justice, like, he has done so many foul things to so many people. If anybody deserved to be vomited on, it's Taylor Lewan. So you're okay.
We're forever connected through my vomit. So.
All right, I have kept you for entirely too long. You're an incredibly busy person, but I cannot let you go without quickly talking about this Bills-Titans game, because this is going to be a problem, I think, for them. Their injury report, I had to put it out in 2 pictures when they just sent it to us in an email. They are banged up, and I don't know what people expect, because they just, you know, they were off for 16 days. They played a whole ass football game, and they're banged up because of it.
Yeah, and Houston has rest. That's the issue. You know, Houston's got 3 days extra rest there. A lot of those injuries are hamstrings, things that we kind of, I think, assumed was going to happen because they had been off for so long. I mean, I say that in one breath, but in the other, you know, I kept pounding before the game started, even when that execution and conditioning was going to be their biggest issue. Go figure, not really. But yeah, no, I think now they're dealing with it. My biggest thing headed into this game is it's actually more mental. I think that, you know, the X's and O's, the matchup between these two, I do think they favor in Tennessee's. It weighs in on Tennessee, or at least it helps them. But I think there was a little us against the world last week. And I think they weren't sure what they could do, knowing that they hadn't had practice, and, you know, it was 2 or 3 for those 2-week span or 16-day span. I think sometimes this is where you put your foot off the gas pedal a little, and I'm going to assume this coaching staff is coaching with their hair on fire this week, knowing obviously that they cannot let up, because all of a sudden the Texans are having fun with Romeo Crennel, get rid of Bill O'Brien, and now these quotes make me laugh of like, wait, so now you guys are finding yourselves? And the thing is, they can. If they win this game, the Texans season turns around completely, and they know that. I talked to people with the Texans this morning on the coaching staff, just trying to figure out some game plan stuff, and they were touching on that of like it's a little bit of a trap game. They kind of feel like they can catch Tennessee coming off this high and maybe feeling themselves a little too much.
Yeah, no doubt. It'll be fascinating to play out. All I know is I'm glad to be back at work for better or worse, and I'm happy to have had Dianna Russini of ESPN. You can follow her on all of the socials at Dianna ESPN. She's a tremendous follow informationally on Twitter and a great time on Instagram. Worth your follow either way. Dianna, thank you so much for hanging out, and continue to stay safe and well. We'll catch up again soon.
Thanks. Next time we hang out, we'll go on roller coaster together.
Just don't puke on me. Just don't puke on me.